Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 20 of Tour of Japan, the review series for the JGTC models of GT6. And in this episode we're featuring the first of a few R35 generation GT-Rs that will be of course featured in the series. This is the Team Motul Autech GT-R. Now this car in the garage, or specifically in the dealership, in its stock state, can appear to be at a disadvantage to the other GT-Rs. Not necessarily the older GT-Rs, but the other R35 generation GT-Rs. It costs the same, but the PP is slightly lower, the power is slightly lower, and it weighs a bit more than some of them, such as the Yellow Hat GT-R. So it doesn't exactly sound like a particularly good deal of a car. The same price for less. But it actually turns out to be not a bad car at all, because when you fully tune it, it actually ends up being pretty much the same as any of the other models, which is kind of strange. And in its fully tuned form, the 4.5 litre engine that it has produces a pretty decent 928 brake horsepower, so it is one of the most powerful GT500 models, alongside virtually all of the other R35 generation Super GT cars. Now, as far as torque, it has a very healthy 668 pound-feet, and it weighs in at 1,130 kilos, which is around 30 kilos heavier than, say, the Yellow Hat GT-R. Now, the PP, as I said, is slightly lower than some of the others, at 663, but not much lower, only 1 or 2 pp for the most part. The main thing that suffers with this model is the power to weight. Now, it doesn't suffer that much, because it does, as I said, have pretty much the same power as any of the other R35s, but it does still weigh more, around 30 kilos more. And as a result of that, the power to weight ratio per tonne is slightly lower. Now, when I say lower, it's still very high. It's still 821 horsepower per tonne, so it's not exactly low, it's just slightly lower than some of the others. Now, it's a 950,000 credit car, same as the other GT-Rs apart from the stealth version. So, price-wise, I mean, it's the same. It's essentially the same car in most of its specs. It's a little bit heavier. Nothing really noticeable, though, in terms of weight difference. Obviously, it does have a difference, but it's only fractions of a second, so minuscule that you don't even really notice it. And overall, to drive, it's a very good car. Now, the GT-R is, of course, a very popular Super GT model. I see more people using the R35 Super GT machines than any of the other Japanese GT cars, because it's just such a formidable racing car, not only within the Super GT class, but also beyond that against GT1 machines, or even full-on prototypes in certain PP categories where they have to be restricted. It has more than enough power to get the job done. It weighs around the same as most of the other JGTC GT500 cars, and it's just a really good all-round package, much in the same way as the road-going GT-R is. For a car of its power, it's very forgiving to drive. You'd expect it to be quite slippery, perhaps, with well over 900 horsepower and a lot of torque, but it really isn't. It has very good handling, and it almost feels actually like an all-wheel drive car. It has that much grip. Now, overall, it's kind of a no-brainer, really, as to my verdict. Of course, the R35 is going to be a good Super GT machine. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of them, because I don't tend to like the obvious choice. I like to go for cars which other people don't. And everyone goes for the GT-R, which means that I generally don't use it. But for people who are purely concerned with victory, it's a very good choice to go for. It's got everything you really need from a Super GT car. It's got a very strong top speed of around 240 miles per hour, very strong acceleration throughout its entire performance range, thanks to the high torque and power. The PP is pretty high, but most lobbies would probably restrict the PP anyway, so that doesn't really matter. As far as weight, Yeah, it's a little bit heavier than some of the other GTRs, but it's also lighter than some of the other cars from other teams, such as the Supra, whatever. And it's a premium model, so you get the fully detailed interior, which is an advantage over, say, some of the older Skyline Super GT cars. So overall, it's not one of my personal favourites, and overall the car is kind of predictable. You already know, really, it's going to be good. But if you're just looking for a kind of old faithful car, which you can pull out every time and know that you're going to do well with it, then the GT-R is a good choice. Not just this one, but all of them, of course. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.